Hi, my name is Angela Harders, and today I want to address with you some very important information that you need to know. As many of you may know, I am a former PMA advisor with PMA Power, which is David Edwards' group. In February of this year, I presented to the PMA Power team multiple instances where I found discrepancies between what we had been taught and what was actually the truth regarding PMAs. Unfortunately, they consistently dismissed me and rejected the things that I was attempting to share with them. Upon realizing the pervasiveness of the lies within the PMA space and freedom communities, I decided that it was necessary for me to come forth and to share the truth about PMAs. First, let me be clear. There is a way that you can conduct your business with privacy. However, the truth is, the majority of what we have been told about PMAs or 508c1as simply is not true. In light of the information that I found, I decided to remove my video, Introduction to PMAs, which at the time was the most watched video about PMAs. One of my top competitors in the PMA space, on YouTube at least, is Dr. Layne Linebaugh. She was also a PMA advisor trained by David Edwards, which meant that she was also continuing to spread misinformation about PMAs, information that could prove to be extremely harmful for people that choose to believe her. In spite of making repeated attempts to share with Layne and to discuss with her the truth about PMAs, she refuses to listen to me. And so for that reason, I'm going to do my best to create this video, which is a rebuttal to a video that Dr. Layne has made. It is important that we can combat the lies with the truth. And so in anything that I present to you, I am not going to be sharing my personal opinion, but instead I will be sharing with you the facts as they are. And then you can decide what you're willing to do with those facts. Keep in mind that my personal opinions and beliefs are not relevant in this video. In fact, I do not agree with a lot of the facts that I'm going to present to you today. But it is important that you can know the facts so that you can make a truly informed decision for you, your family, and your future. All right, let's dive in.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Health Freedom with Dr. Layne. And in this video, we are going to finish up our series on the differences, the benefits between churches, ministries, and faith-based organizations, which you're going to hear, they're kind of all a faith-based organization, but there are some differences. Check out those videos previous to this ones to find out about unincorporated, incorporated churches and ministries. So what is a faith-based organization and how does it fit into the private membership association structure? A faith-based organization is a church, a ministry, or both, but it doesn't have to be either. With the proper founding, you can have an organization that is faith-based, but is not a church or a ministry. For example, I have a faith-based private health association or private membership association. It's just another title for my health association.
Okay, so Layne defines a faith-based organization as a church, a ministry, or as a faith-based PMA. The truth is, the term faith-based organization is not a legal term. And if we simply look at what the individual words mean, faith-based organization, it is an organization that is based on a particular faith. By that definition, even organizations like Chick-fil-A or Hobby Lobby are also considered faith-based organizations. It is important to remember that this term, FBO, faith-based organizations, is not a legal term and literally could incorporate any type of organization, although it does typically refer to nonprofits, but any kind of business or organization that is incorporating its faith.
A PMA, all your clients must be members, and this is a little bit different than the ministry or church structure. The PMA have a member-to agreement. with a ministry or a church, you can go to a public event that they have or go visit the church, but you don't have to be a member. You may decide to become a member. You may decide to make greater use of their services and then become a member of that organization. With a faith-based organization, you can still have services as your payment fee or charging fee. You don't have to call them donations for your services, whereas a church or a ministry needs to have the donation structure in place.
One of my biggest concerns with the things that Dr. Layne and people like her are continuing to share. They tend to lump together churches and ministries as if they are the same and if they can operate in the same way, and that is just not true. She says that churches and ministries are able to and have to operate with a donation structure. But again, that is not true. The IRS states donors are allowed to claim a charitable deduction for donations to a church that meets the 501c3 requirements, even though the church has neither sought nor received IRS recognition that it is tax exempt. So keep in mind, churches are able to receive and issue donations, but if you are operating a ministry, you cannot accept or receive tax deductible donations unless you have applied for 501c3 tax exempt status.
A faith-based organization isn't quite as diverse. That's totally okay. It just means that you're focusing your craft, your healing arts, your coaching, your education that isn't going to be a school in a more focused area instead of having a lot of different things going. And do remember that you do need to have a solid faith-based belief system to qualify as a faith-based organization. I mean, it just makes good sense, right? We're not trying to work the system. We are saying that since the system is out of their lane, we are moving into a new lane with a very strong divider or shield or wall around it.
So here again, we see Dr. Layne conflating several different ideas into the same one. She's trying to argue that by being faith-based and also by being private, that's going to put up some magic wall that you don't have to follow any other rules and regulations. And she's about to tell you what that means when it comes to taxes. Listen in.
All right, so here's a question that everybody has is taxes. First of all, if you decide to take the PMA route and establish a faith-based organization, whether it's the church, the ministry, or a faith-based organization, something like I have, the 508c1a title that you hear talked about a lot is actually, it's a tax code. It's the IRS tax code, and that's all it is. So you don't have a 508. That's the tax code. You have a ministry or a church or a faith-based organization.
Dr. Layne refers to IRS tax code section 508c1a. Let's take a look at it. IRS code section 508c1a says that churches, their integrated auxiliaries, and conventions or associations of churches have a mandatory exception. Notice the language that is used in the code. Churches, their integrated auxiliaries, and conventions or associations of churches. Do you see any mention here of a ministry? No. Do you see any mention here of a faith-based organization? Also no. So section 508c1a applies to exactly what it says. Churches, their integrated auxiliaries, and associations of churches, not to ministries or faith-based organizations, as Dr. Layne has said.
So how did we get here? Well, a 508c1a faith-based organization tax exemption status stems from the First Amendment, and it's not a government subsidy.
Here, Dr. Layne makes reference to the First Amendment. Well, let's take a look and see, what does the First Amendment actually say? The First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. One of the important things for us to note is that the First Amendment is not talking about taxes or tax exempt status at all. The purpose of the First Amendment was to prevent the government from making a law establishing a religion, basically from forcing people to follow any kind of particular religion. And this is something that's really unique because the whole reason why people came to the United States in the first place was because they wanted to have religious freedom. They wanted to be able to practice their religious beliefs without having the government tell them that they had to be a particular religion. That's the purpose of the First Amendment. It's talking about the government establishing a church for the people, not about operating a faith-based business or about tax-exempt status.
The faith-based organizations can be organized and operate under the Section 508 of the tax code, the same as they can be organized and operate under any other section of the tax code.
Remember, a faith-based organization is any type of organization that incorporates its faith. This could be a for-profit business like Chick-fil-A, or it could be a nonprofit business, church, or charity. But as we saw from Section 508C1A, it is only churches. Churches are the only type of faith-based organization that are able to operate under Section 508C1A.
A 508C1A faith-based organization has a constitutional and legal right to form. Therefore, there's no required application for that tax-exempt status.
Under the First Amendment, you have a legal right to form a church and to practice your faith. You do not have a right to claim that your faith-based business is automatically tax exempt.
Since the 508C1As are tax exempt, they're already tax exempt.
Remember, 508C1A means church.
As a right, they don't have to give up that right to religious exercise and free speech as the 501C3 sneaks in.
The IRS website clearly states that churches that meet the Section 501c3 requirements are the only ones that have the automatic tax exception. If you would like to learn more about this or read court cases that are related to this topic, I invite you to download the PMA Manifesto at thepmamanifesto.com. This is a 26-page document full of all of the research that I've compiled along with my other team members that have left PMA Power in order to share the truth about PMAs.
They become a creature of the state. All organizations seeking tax-exempt status must apply to the IRS except for the faith-based organization.
It is only churches that have an automatic mandatory tax exception. Faith-based organizations are not automatically tax exempt. In IRS publication 1828, it very clearly states that unlike churches, religious organizations or faith-based organizations that wish to be tax exempt must generally apply to the IRS for tax exempt status unless their gross receipts do not normally exceed $5,000 annually, which is most organizations.
FBOs, they can be formed under this Section 508C1A and enjoy the mandatory exemptions which are already inherent in their structure as a religious organization.
Also in IRS publication 1828, in the introduction, we read that because special tax rules apply to churches, it's important to distinguish churches from other religious or faith-based organizations. Therefore, when the publication uses the term religious organizations, again, or faith-based organizations, it isn't referring to churches or integrated auxiliaries. Religious organizations that are not churches typically include non-denominational ministries.
Section 508 was codified in the Internal Revenue Code in order to formally establish the right to free exercise of religion, which had been a standard upon America was founded and governed since it's gained its independence.
Section 508c1a has nothing to do with the free expression of your religion. In fact, it actually supports quite the opposite. Because as we read in IRS publication 1828, it says that all 501c3 organizations, including churches and religious organizations, must abide by these certain rules. And one of those rules is that they must not participate in or intervene in any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for public office. This restriction applies to churches and religious organizations, whether or not they have applied to be a 501c3 or not. Now, I don't agree with this at all, but this is what the code says as it stands today. And this is what also has been upheld in courts, even though I personally believe this is a violation of our First Amendment liberty.
So again, by the very nature of its creation, a religious nonprofit tax-exempt organization.
And once again, we see Layne combining three different things into one: religious, nonprofit, and tax exempt.
Section 508 was part of the legislation passed in the Tax Reform Act of 1969, codified as public law. And the intent of our U.S. Congress in passing this Section 508 was to make sure that the important First Amendment religious speech rights were protected when they overhauled and authorized sweeping new changes to the tax code in 1969. And this tax act codified those substantial changes in the treatment of the 501c3s. So this is when they had to apply. They have to file the tax return annually, comply with rules and regulations that the IRS may from time to time prescribe, keep records of income and expenses, and render under oath about the organization. So they become the creature of the state.
Churches are not required to file anything anyway, whether they're incorporated or unincorporated, or whether they're a 501c3 or a 508c1a. They were never required to file an annual return. And it says so right here. In addition, because churches and certain other religious organizations are not required to file an annual return or notice with the IRS, they are not subject to automatic revocation of exemption for failure to file.
They become a public entity, not a private entity, as we are in the private membership association world or domain.
Unfortunately, Dr. Layne does not have an accurate understanding of what it means to be private. If you would like to understand what that means, I actually made a whole video on it. Check out my new and updated Introduction to PMAs video, where I discuss what it actually means to be private.
If you have questions about this or anything else dealing with private membership associations, go ahead and look in the description below, and you can follow the link to book a free consultation call. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for the plug, Dr. Layne. Please be sure to check below in order to book a consultation with me. Whether you have a PMA or you are just thinking about getting a PMA, it is worth it to spend the $100 to meet with me, because those $100 could potentially save you thousands of dollars from getting something that is not correct from someone like Dr. Layne or any of the other many people out there promoting private membership associations that just want to tell you what you want to believe is true when the reality is something very different. With me, I will make sure that you are absolutely operating in the best structure for you and for what you want to accomplish. My dad was an entrepreneur and a businessman, and he used to say, if you think hiring a professional is expensive, just wait till you hire someone who's not. It's important that when you're seeking to establish your organization, whether it's a faith-based organization, for-profit, nonprofit, church, ministry, whatever kind of organization you're wanting to set up, it's important that you can organize properly and then that you can operate properly. which is why it is so important to partner with someone like me or the rest of the members of my team at the PMA Manifesto in order to make sure that you are set up properly, and then we will be able to walk with you through the steps on how you can actually operate properly as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I deeply appreciate your support.